She woke up before the sun, the light still soft and pale over the fields. The air was fresh, carrying the smell of damp soil and hay. The house was quiet, except for the soft breathing of her children and the occasional sound of a rooster crowing in the distance. She moved slowly, careful not to wake anyone. Her hands were already rough from years of work, but she felt a quiet energy in her fingers as she prepared for the day. The kitchen smelled of warm bread and tea. She placed a kettle on the stove and poured water into a cup, letting it heat slowly. As the steam rose, she leaned against the counter and looked out the window. The fields stretched far and wide, golden and green, ready for another day of work. She sighed, a soft sound, part of the rhythm of life she had come to accept. She loved this life, but it left little room for dreams that belonged to another world, a world of music she had almost forgotten. Her memories often took her back to the small piano in her childhood home. She remembered the way her fingers had once danced across the keys, the joy that had flowed through her when she could play a song perfectly. Her parents had encouraged her, but life had its own plans. She had set aside the piano for chores, for helping with family work, for the responsibilities that never seemed to end. The piano sat in a corner of her home, gathering dust, much like her forgotten dream. She moved to the fields, the soil soft beneath her boots. The sun rose slowly, casting a warm glow over the land. She felt the weight of the day ahead, carrying water buckets, tending to the animals, checking the crops, mending fences. Each task was familiar, steady, and necessary. Yet, in quiet moments, she felt a pull in her chest, a whisper of longing for something more, something that could not be measured by the size of the harvest or the health of the animals. The animals seemed to sense her mood. The chickens clucked softly as she scattered feed. The cows moved calmly as she milked them. The horses nuzzled her hand. She talked to them in low, gentle tones, finding comfort in the routine. Work grounded her, but it could not chase away the memory of the piano or the music she had once known. By mid-morning, the sun was higher, warm on her back. She paused for a moment under the shade of a large oak tree. Sweat dripped down her face, mixing with the dust of the fields. She closed her eyes and let the sounds of the farm wash over her, the rustle of leaves, the low hum of bees, the distant call of birds. Somewhere deep in her mind, she imagined music blending with these sounds, a melody that only she could hear. It made her smile, a small, secret smile, because she knew that the music was still alive within her, waiting for the moment it could emerge again. Lunch was simple: bread, cheese, and fresh vegetables from the garden. She ate quickly, thinking about the tasks that still waited. The day was long, and the work never truly ended. Still, she allowed herself a few quiet moments, listening to the wind and feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin. She thought about the upcoming community gathering in the town hall. She had heard people talking about it over the fence or at the market. There would be music, singing, and laughter. She felt a flutter of excitement and fear at the thought of being there. She had always been shy about her talent. It was something private, tucked away in the corners of her life. People knew her as a hard-working farmer's wife, a woman devoted to her family and her home. They did not know about the hours she had spent practicing, about the songs she could play from memory, or the music that still lived in her hands. To reveal it now felt both thrilling and terrifying. The afternoon was busy. She carried water, tended to the animals again, and repaired a broken fence near the edge of the field. The sun was hot, and her back ached, but she kept moving. The rhythm of work was almost like music itself, steady and constant. And yet, every time she bent over or lifted a bucket, her thoughts drifted to the piano, to the feeling of keys under her fingers, to the sound that could fill a room and touch hearts. As the sun began to set, she prepared a small dinner for her family. The children laughed and played in the yard, their energy unending. She watched them, a soft smile on her face, feeling the warmth of home and family. But even in this happiness, the longing remained, a quiet note that had not been played for years. It reminded her that there was still a part of herself waiting to be heard. After dinner, she cleaned the kitchen and put the children to bed. The house was quiet again, and she felt a sense of peace. She walked to the corner of her home where the piano sat. Dust covered its keys, but it was still beautiful. She ran her fingers lightly across the surface, feeling the familiar contours. A note rang out, imperfect but full of promise. Her heart quickened. She closed her eyes and let her hands remember, letting the memory of music flow through her. The notes were uneven at first, hesitant, but they grew stronger. She remembered the joy of playing a melody that could make someone smile or cry, the way music could express what words could not. She played quietly, just for herself, letting the sound fill the small room. Each note carried the years of longing, of dreams set aside, and of a passion that had never truly left her. Hours passed. She did not notice the time, lost in the music that came alive beneath her fingers. The moon rose, casting a soft glow through the window, illuminating the keys and her face. She felt a connection to something larger than herself, something timeless. The music was not perfect, but it was hers and it was enough. She realized that even in the life of a farmer's wife, there was room for wonder, for beauty, and for moments that touched the soul. She finally stopped, her fingers tired but her spirit light. She leaned back, listening to the silence that followed, feeling a quiet pride. The music was still within her, waiting for the right time, for the right moment to be shared. She knew that someday, she would play in front of others, and the music would tell a story that words could never capture. For now, she allowed herself to dream, to remember, and to hope. She went to bed with a calm heart, the memory of the piano lingering in her mind. The fields would still need tending, the animals would still need care, and the family would still depend on her. But she also knew that a part of her, the part that loved music and had never given up on it, would always be alive. And that part of her would find its moment, just as she had found a quiet moment tonight, when the world seemed to pause and listen to the song that had waited so long to be heard. She awoke early, as she always did, with the soft light of dawn spilling through the small window. Today felt different. There was a quiet excitement in her chest that she could not explain. She went through the morning chores with her usual diligence, feeding the animals and gathering fresh eggs, but her mind wandered constantly to the town hall where the community gathering would be held. A friend had told her that there would be music, laughter, and people sharing stories, and although the thought made her heart race, it also made her hesitant. As she worked, she worried. What would people think of her? A simple farmer's wife, showing up at a hall full of musicians and performers? She had not played in years, and her skills had faded. The piano at home had been her secret joy, hidden away, and she was unsure if it would still obey her hands. Yet the idea of sitting in the hall, letting her fingers touch the keys in front of others, filled her with a longing she could not ignore. Her children ran about, their laughter echoing across the yard. She watched them for a moment, brushing her hands on her apron, and wondered what it would feel like to share something so personal with others. The thought of leaving the familiar farm and stepping into the larger world felt both thrilling and frightening. She felt a mixture of fear, excitement, and hope, a strange blend that made her heart beat faster. By mid-morning, she had finished most of the chores. She carried a basket of freshly picked vegetables to the kitchen, arranging them neatly, though her mind was elsewhere. Her friend came by to encourage her, noticing her nervous expression. "You should go," the friend said softly. "It will be good for you. Everyone will enjoy hearing you play. You have a gift, and it is time to share it." She nodded, unsure if she could, but feeling a spark of courage ignite inside her. She began to prepare for the trip to town. It was a short journey, but it required careful planning. She washed herself quickly, brushed her hair, and selected a simple but neat dress. It was not fancy, but it was clean and presentable. As she worked, she kept glancing at the small leather satchel she carried, where she had tucked a few music sheets she had memorized long ago. It was like carrying a part of her past, a reminder of what she had loved so deeply and had not yet lost. The walk to the town was filled with quiet contemplation. She passed familiar fields and neighbors tending to their own chores. Some greeted her with friendly waves, others with curious glances. She smiled politely, but her thoughts were on the hall, on the piano, and on the fear that she might falter in front of others. Yet the longing for music, for expression, was stronger than the fear. When she arrived at the hall, she paused at the entrance. The doors were open, and she could hear the low hum of voices and the occasional note of music being practiced. She hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath. The hall seemed larger than she expected, and the number of people inside made her stomach flutter with nerves. Yet she reminded herself why she was here, and slowly, she stepped inside. The room was filled with performers and guests. People were chatting, laughing, and preparing for their turns. She found a quiet corner and observed, taking in the instruments, the smiles, and the energy that filled the space. Her heart pounded as she thought about the piano at the far side of the hall. It was old, worn, but sturdy. She knew that it had the same keys as the one she had practiced on for years. Slowly, she made her way toward it, each step a mixture of fear and anticipation. When she reached the piano, she paused. Her fingers hovered above the keys. She remembered the touch, the feel of the wood beneath her hands, the weight of each key. She took a deep breath and allowed herself a small smile. No one had yet noticed her presence, and she hoped she could gather the courage to play even a single note. Her fingers touched the keys lightly, almost hesitantly. A note rang out, clear and pure, though softer than she had hoped. She tried another, then another, and the sound began to flow more naturally. The music she had memorized came to her mind, and she let it guide her fingers. She played quietly at first, unsure if anyone was listening, but gradually the notes grew stronger and more confident. People began to notice her. Some stopped their conversations, curious about the soft melody weaving through the room. Others turned, surprised to see a simple farmer's wife seated at the piano, yet playing with a skill that they had not expected. Whispers spread through the crowd, some incredulous, some admiring. Her heart raced, but she focused on the music, letting it carry her beyond her fear. With each note, she felt a sense of freedom she had not experienced in years. The music was hers, alive again, and it seemed to speak to everyone around her. She could see the expressions of those listening, the surprise, the delight, the quiet admiration. It was a strange and wonderful feeling to know that something so private, so deeply personal, could touch others. Her mind drifted back to her childhood, to the hours spent at a small piano, learning scales and melodies, practicing until her fingers ached but her heart sang. She remembered the encouragement of her parents and the joy of mastering a difficult piece. All of that had come rushing back, and now it was more than memory. It was alive, flowing through her hands into the hall. The first song ended, and she hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should continue. There was a brief pause, and then a soft applause began, growing steadily as more people joined in. She felt a blush rise to her cheeks, a mixture of pride and embarrassment. Encouraged, she decided to play another piece, letting the music grow bolder, more confident, and more expressive. As she played, she became aware of the atmosphere in the hall. The murmurs of conversation had ceased. People leaned forward, drawn into the music. She noticed a few children, eyes wide, completely captivated. An elderly man nodded quietly, recognizing the depth of emotion she poured into the keys. Each note carried not just melody, but feeling, a story of years spent working, dreaming, and longing. Time seemed to slip away. She did not notice the sun moving lower in the sky or the clock ticking on the wall. All that existed was the piano, her hands, and the people listening. She had feared judgment, failure, and embarrassment. But those fears had melted away, replaced by the joy of creating something beautiful and sharing it. She realized that music was a bridge, connecting her to others in a way that words could never fully capture. The final notes of her second piece lingered in the air, soft and haunting. The hall remained quiet for a heartbeat, and then the applause returned, louder and more heartfelt. She looked up, seeing smiles, nods of respect, and faces full of wonder. The fear she had felt before stepping into the hall seemed distant now, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and belonging. People began to approach her, asking questions, offering compliments, and expressing surprise at her talent. She responded shyly, grateful but humble, feeling a warmth in her chest that she had not known she could feel in such a public place. She realized that her music had found its voice again, and it had the power to touch hearts, to bring people together, and to remind her that she was more than just the work of the farm. By the end of the gathering, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had faced her fear, shared her passion, and found that the world was not as intimidating as she had imagined. The piano had become her companion once again, a source of comfort, joy, and expression. She left the hall with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that this was only the beginning of a journey that had waited patiently for her all these years. As she walked back to the farm, the evening sky painted in soft hues of orange and pink, she felt a lightness in her step. The fields were familiar, the chores awaited, and the responsibilities of home were still hers. Yet, she carried with her a sense of freedom, a knowledge that her music could live beyond the walls of her home, touching others in ways she had never imagined. She knew that she would play again, and that one day, the music she had kept secret for so long would become a gift shared freely with the world. The next morning she woke with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The memory of the previous day's small triumph still lingered in her mind. She had felt the thrill of playing in front of people, the power of music to touch hearts, and the joy of reconnecting with a part of herself she had almost forgotten. Yet the idea of returning to the hall, this time more deliberately, made her stomach flutter. She knew she had to prepare herself, not only in practice but in courage. She moved through her morning chores with a careful rhythm, her hands busy but her mind alive with melodies. The chickens clucked around her feet, the cows waited patiently, and the horses nudged her for attention, but she could barely focus on them. Every task was automatic, a background to the music that played in her imagination. She hummed softly to herself, running through the pieces she wanted to play, feeling each note as she moved through the barn, carrying water, and brushing the animals. Her neighbor stopped by with a basket of freshly picked fruit. They chatted about the weather and the coming season, but she barely heard the words. Her thoughts kept returning to the piano and the hall. The neighbor noticed her distraction and smiled knowingly. "You are thinking about yesterday, aren't you?" they asked. She nodded, feeling a small blush rise to her cheeks. "Go on, let your gift shine," they encouraged gently. Their support, though simple, strengthened her resolve. She felt less alone in this journey. After finishing the morning chores, she retreated to her small home and sat at her own piano. Dust still clung to the keys, but she did not mind. She pressed a few notes, letting her fingers remember the touch and weight. Slowly, the music began to flow, uneven at first, then more fluid, more expressive. She practiced the pieces she wanted to perform, feeling her confidence grow with each passing moment. The room filled with the soft, gentle sound of the piano, echoing off the walls and carrying with it the memories of years past. The children came in, curious about the music, their eyes wide and attentive. She smiled at them, feeling warmth and pride. She did not mind if they listened. She welcomed it. Music, she realized, could be a part of life even in small ways, not just grand performances. The youngest reached up to touch a key, giggling at the sound it made. She laughed softly, remembering herself at that age, exploring the piano with wonder and delight. The memory gave her courage and reminded her that joy could be found in simple acts of expression. As the afternoon approached, she prepared to walk to the hall once again. She chose her best dress, one that was simple but neat, and brushed her hair until it fell smoothly over her shoulders. She tucked the music sheets she had memorized into a small satchel, a tangible reminder of her preparation. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped outside. The familiar path to town seemed different today, alive with possibility and expectation. Each step carried her closer to the hall and to the moment she had been waiting for. When she arrived, the hall was already lively. Musicians were tuning instruments, people were arranging chairs, and the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. She paused at the doorway, feeling the weight of expectation pressing gently on her shoulders. Her friend, who had encouraged her before, gave her a reassuring nod from across the room. She returned the gesture, grateful for the silent support. Slowly, she made her way to the piano, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. She seated herself at the piano, taking a deep breath. Her fingers hovered above the keys, hesitant at first. The hall seemed larger than ever, filled with eyes watching her every move, but she focused on the music instead of the crowd. The first note rang out, pure and clear. Then another and another. The music began to flow, her fingers finding the rhythm and melody that had been dormant for so long. The hall seemed to fade away as she played, leaving only her and the piano, the notes carrying her heart to every corner of the room. People noticed immediately. Conversations stopped, and all attention turned to the music. Some faces showed surprise, others admiration, and a few eyes glistened with emotion. The notes were more confident than the day before, more expressive, revealing the depth of her talent and the passion she had carried quietly for so long. Her heart swelled with a mixture of pride and humility. She had feared failure, yet now she realized that her fear had been overshadowed by the power of the music itself. She played piece after piece, each one flowing into the next, a seamless expression of her years of practice and the love she had for the piano. The hall was silent except for the music, a shared experience that transcended words. She felt the connection to the audience, a silent understanding that the notes spoke to emotions they could all feel. It was as if the piano had become a voice for feelings that could not be expressed otherwise, a bridge between her world and theirs. During a pause between pieces, she looked up at the audience. The expressions on their faces told her more than words ever could. There was wonder, respect, and genuine appreciation. Children leaned forward, eager to hear the next note. Adults whispered to each other, amazed at the depth and skill she displayed. Even the musicians, some seasoned and accomplished, nodded subtly, recognizing the natural talent and emotion she conveyed through her playing. The quiet encouragement and attention gave her a newfound sense of confidence. She closed her eyes and let the music guide her hands. Each piece became more than just notes on a page. It became a story, a reflection of her life, her joys, her struggles, and her dreams. She remembered the long hours spent at home, the quiet nights when the family slept, and the longing she had felt to play freely again. All of that poured into her performance, creating a resonance that was felt by everyone listening. She realized that music could carry more than sound. It could carry history, emotion, and soul. Time seemed suspended. She did not notice the hours passing, the light shifting in the room, or the clock on the wall. All that existed was the music, the piano, and the shared experience of the audience. The fear and doubt she had carried for so long had melted away, replaced by a pure, unfiltered joy. She was no longer just a farmer's wife. She was a musician, a storyteller, and a voice for the beauty that had always been within her. The final piece ended with a soft, lingering note. The hall remained quiet for a moment, as if holding its breath, before erupting into applause. The sound was overwhelming and exhilarating, and she felt tears prick at her eyes. People approached her, some with words of admiration, others with questions about her music and training. She responded with humility and gratitude, feeling a deep sense of connection to everyone who had listened. It was a moment she would never forget, a turning point in her life and in her understanding of what was possible. As she left the hall, the evening sky casting a golden glow over the town, she felt a lightness in her step and a warmth in her heart. The walk home was quiet, filled with reflection. She had faced her fear, shared her talent, and discovered a new strength within herself. The farm awaited, the chores and responsibilities unchanged, but she carried with her a sense of purpose and freedom. She knew that her music would not remain hidden any longer and that the piano, once a quiet companion, had become a powerful voice. Back at home, she tended to the animals, prepared a simple meal, and watched her children play in the yard. The night was calm, the stars twinkling overhead, and she felt a profound sense of peace. Music had returned to her life, not as a dream tucked away, but as a living, breathing part of her existence. She realized that talent, when nurtured and shared, could touch lives, inspire others, and transform even the simplest moments into something extraordinary. And she knew that this was only the beginning, that the piano and her music would continue to guide her, bringing joy, connection, and beauty to a world that sometimes forgot to pause and listen. The morning sun filled the farmhouse with a warm glow as she woke, a feeling of anticipation in her chest. She moved through her usual routine with quiet determination, tending to the animals, preparing breakfast, and checking the fields. Everything seemed normal, but she carried a secret excitement within her. The previous day's performance had given her courage, and today she felt ready to embrace the music even more fully. She was determined to let herself go completely, to play with all the emotion and passion she had held inside for so long. Her children were bustling around, full of energy, and she watched them with a soft smile. Their laughter was a comforting rhythm, a reminder of the life she nurtured and loved. She thought of the hall, of the audience waiting, and felt a mixture of nerves and exhilaration. The thought of returning, of performing another piece, made her heart beat faster, yet she welcomed it. She knew that each note she played carried a story, a piece of herself, and she was ready to share it without fear. After finishing the morning chores, she sat at the piano in her home for a final practice. Dust clung lightly to the keys, but that did not matter. Her fingers danced across them with familiarity and grace, the melodies flowing as if they had never been interrupted. Each piece she played was more confident than the last, infused with emotion that had been bottled up for years. She closed her eyes and let herself imagine the hall, the people listening, the soft hush as the first notes rang out. She was not just practicing music, she was preparing her heart. When she finally walked to the hall, the streets seemed alive with possibility. Neighbors waved, and some offered encouraging words. The community had heard of her performance the day before, and the murmurs of admiration followed her quietly as she made her way to the doors. The hall itself buzzed with energy, filled with musicians, singers, and visitors all gathered to enjoy the performances. She paused for a moment at the entrance, taking a deep breath, steadying herself. Today she would play not just to show her skill, but to share a part of her soul. She approached the piano, the polished wood gleaming in the sunlight streaming through the windows. The hall was larger than her home, and the number of faces watching made her pulse quicken. Yet as she seated herself, she felt a calmness settle over her. She touched the keys lightly at first, testing their response, feeling the familiar weight beneath her fingers. The first notes sounded clear and confident, and she let herself sink into the music, allowing it to carry her away. The audience leaned in, drawn by the sound, their attention fixed. Conversations had ceased, and the hall was still except for the gentle flow of the piano. Each piece she played was more daring, more expressive, as if she were pouring years of life, work, and hidden emotion into the melody. She felt a deep connection to the listeners, a silent understanding passing between her and them. The music was no longer just sound. It was a language that everyone in the room could comprehend, a shared experience that transcended words. She played with abandon, letting her fingers explore the keys fully, the notes rising and falling with a natural beauty that came from years of intimacy with the instrument. Her heart guided her hands, and every pause, every soft touch, was deliberate and full of feeling. The audience responded subtly at first, leaning forward, closing their eyes, allowing themselves to be carried along by the music. Some whispered softly, admiring the skill, while others were visibly moved, caught off guard by the depth and emotion she expressed. She noticed a young student in the front row, eyes wide with wonder, completely absorbed in the melody. It reminded her of herself at that age, discovering the joy and possibility of music for the first time. She felt a quiet joy in sharing that same feeling, in giving someone else the gift of being transported by sound. Across the room, an elderly musician nodded appreciatively, recognizing the years of dedication and innate talent that made her performance so compelling. The quiet approval strengthened her resolve and fueled her confidence. As the music continued, she allowed herself to tell stories through the piano. Each piece was a chapter, a reflection of her life. Days of hard work, moments of longing, bursts of joy, and times of quiet reflection. She played faster passages with energy and lightness, and slower ones with tenderness and depth. The hall became a canvas, and her fingers painted emotions across it, leaving invisible brushstrokes that everyone could feel. She was no longer just performing. She was communicating, connecting, and inspiring. The audience was captivated. They followed each rise and fall of the music, some swaying gently in their seats, some holding their breath during particularly delicate moments. Children leaned forward, eager for the next note, while adults watched with quiet reverence. Every person in the hall was engaged, drawn into the world she created with each touch of the keys. She realized that the music had become a bridge, connecting her life on the farm with the lives of those who listened, making them part of her story. A hush fell over the hall as she moved into the final piece. This one was longer, more intricate, and required full concentration. She felt a thrill as her hands moved with precision and emotion, creating a melody that was both powerful and delicate. The audience listened intently, sensing the effort, the passion, and the years of quiet dedication behind every note. She could see the expressions of awe and admiration on their faces, and it gave her a quiet pride. Her music was no longer just a private joy, it was a shared gift. As the final note lingered in the hall, there was a moment of complete silence, as if everyone collectively held their breath, savoring the last echo. Then applause erupted, first softly, then growing louder, filling the room with sound. She opened her eyes, feeling tears prick at the corners, overwhelmed by the response. People rose to their feet, clapping, smiling, and offering words of praise. She felt humbled, grateful, and exhilarated all at once. The piano had allowed her to speak a language that transcended words, and the audience had understood every syllable. People approached her after the performance, some asking questions about her life and how she had learned to play, others simply expressing admiration. She responded with quiet humility, explaining that her love for music had always been a private companion, a part of her that had grown alongside her daily life. They listened intently, inspired by her dedication and passion, and some confided that her courage to perform gave them hope to pursue their own hidden talents. She realized that sharing her gift had not only fulfilled her own longing, but had sparked something in others as well. As she walked home that evening, the sky painted in deep hues of orange and purple, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The farm awaited, with its endless chores and responsibilities, but her heart felt lighter, freer. She had faced fear, shared her deepest passion, and discovered that talent nurtured quietly could bloom in unexpected and beautiful ways. The music had become a part of her identity, a source of strength, joy, and connection. Back at the farm, she tended to her animals and prepared a simple meal, reflecting on the day's events. The night was calm, the stars twinkling overhead, and she felt a sense of peace that she had never known before. Music had returned to her life, not just as a private joy but as a force that could move hearts and inspire others. She realized that her journey was far from over. There would be more performances, more opportunities to share her gift, and more moments where the piano would speak for her, bridging the gap between her simple life and the larger world beyond the farm. She went to bed that night with a sense of fulfillment, her hands still tingling from the hours of playing. The memories of the hall, the audience, and the music lingered in her mind, a reminder of what could happen when courage and passion met. She knew that she had found something precious, something that could never be taken away, the ability to touch lives through her music and to express the depth of her soul in a way that words alone could never capture. The piano had become her voice, her companion, and her path to a world she had once only dreamed of reaching. The day began quietly, with the soft light of dawn spilling over the fields, but she felt a sense of anticipation she had never known before. The previous days had changed something inside her. Music, which had once been a private joy, had now become a part of her life that could touch others. She moved through her morning chores with a calm determination, feeding the animals and checking the crops, but her mind was already alive with possibilities. Today felt like a culmination, a moment to reflect on everything she had experienced and the journey she had taken. As she worked, she thought about the audience in the hall, the faces of those who had listened to her music with awe and respect. She remembered the children leaning forward, the elderly musician nodding, and the whispers of admiration that had followed her performance. She realized that sharing her music had done more than give her courage. It had created a connection, a bridge between her world and theirs. The idea that something she had held so privately could inspire, move, and touch others filled her with a quiet pride. Her morning was filled with the familiar rhythm of farm life, yet each task was infused with a new awareness. She noticed the small details, the way the sunlight glinted off the leaves, the soft hum of bees in the garden, the gentle nuzzle of the animals she cared for. Each moment felt more vivid, more meaningful, as if the world itself was resonating with the music she had brought into it. She felt a deep gratitude for her life, for the work that sustained her family, and for the talent that had waited patiently to be shared. As the afternoon approached, she returned to her piano at home. The instrument had become a companion, a channel through which she could express her innermost thoughts and emotions. She played softly, letting the notes flow freely, experimenting with melodies she had never dared to try before. Each sound carried a part of her story, a reflection of years spent working, dreaming, and longing for something more. The music was no longer just practice. It was a conversation, a way to speak without words, and she reveled in the freedom it gave her. The memory of the hall, the audience, and the applause from previous performances lingered in her mind. She thought about the impact her music had on others, how it had stirred emotions, inspired reflection, and even sparked hope. It was a powerful realization, one that filled her with both humility and excitement. She understood that her gift was not just for herself. It was something that could bring light into the lives of those who listened. This thought motivated her, making her practice not just with skill, but with intention and heart. Later, she prepared to visit the hall once more, this time to participate in a small community concert organized for local performers. She dressed simply but neatly, choosing clothes that were comfortable yet presentable. Her hands trembled slightly as she carried her music sheets and approached the familiar building. The streets seemed alive with the same curiosity and warmth she had felt before. Neighbors waved, offering words of encouragement, and she felt a quiet reassurance from their support. Each step brought her closer to the moment she had been anticipating for so long. Inside the hall, the atmosphere was vibrant. Performers tuned their instruments, voices warmed up, and the audience began to gather. She found a quiet corner to gather her thoughts, taking a deep breath as she prepared to perform. The piano stood waiting, familiar yet still filled with a sense of possibility. She seated herself and let her fingers hover above the keys, feeling the familiar weight and texture. The first note sounded, resonating through the hall, and a calm confidence settled over her. She began to play, each note flowing naturally, guided by years of practice and the passion that had never left her. The audience listened intently, drawn into the music as if it were a living thing. She could see the expressions on their faces, the surprise, the delight, the quiet awe, and she felt a deep connection to each person. The piano became an extension of herself, a voice for emotions she had carried quietly, and now shared openly. The music spoke of life, of love, of perseverance, and of the joy that comes from following one's heart. As she played, she noticed the subtle reactions of those around her. Children swayed gently in time with the music. Adults leaned forward, captivated, and some closed their eyes, allowing themselves to be fully immersed. The melodies carried not just sound, but a story of her journey. The long days on the farm, the quiet nights of practice, and the courage it had taken to share her gift. She realized that music had a power beyond words, a way to touch souls and bring people together. Each note was a bridge between her world and theirs. The performance flowed seamlessly, with each piece more expressive than the last. She played faster passages with lightness and energy, slower ones with depth and tenderness. The hall seemed to breathe with her, every listener attuned to the rise and fall of the melody. She was fully present, fully alive in the music, and it felt as though nothing else existed except the piano, the notes, and the shared experience. It was a moment of pure connection, a realization of what she had always hoped music could be. When the final piece came to an end, she allowed the last note to linger, holding it just long enough for the hall to absorb its meaning. Silence followed, a collective pause that felt almost sacred. Then the applause began, first softly, then growing into a wave of appreciation that filled the room. She opened her eyes, feeling tears welling up, overwhelmed by the warmth and acknowledgement of those who had listened. The sound of clapping, the smiles, and the words of praise were more than validation. They were a recognition of her courage and her talent. After the concert, people approached her to speak, their words full of admiration and encouragement. Some asked about her training, others about her life, and a few simply thanked her for the beauty she had brought into the hall. She responded with humility, grateful for the acknowledgement but more touched by the connection she felt. She realized that her music had created something larger than herself, a shared experience that had resonated with everyone who had heard it. It was a profound realization, one that brought both joy and a sense of responsibility. Walking home that evening, the sky painted with shades of orange and pink, she felt a lightness in her step. The farm awaited, with its chores and routines, but her heart was filled with a sense of fulfillment and purpose. She had discovered that her music could live beyond the walls of her home, reaching others and inspiring them. The piano, once a silent companion, had become a voice for her soul and a source of connection with the world around her. Back at the farmhouse, she tended to the animals, prepared a simple meal, and watched the children play under the fading light. The night was calm, the stars beginning to twinkle, and she felt a profound sense of peace. Music had become an inseparable part of her life, a force that could bring beauty, comfort, and meaning. She understood that her journey was far from over. There would be more performances, more opportunities to share her gift, and more moments where the piano would speak for her. She felt ready to embrace it all, knowing that she had found something that would never leave her. As she lay down to rest, her hands still tingling from the day's performance, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the quiet hours of practice at home to the nervous steps toward the hall, to the thrill of sharing her music with others, every moment had led to this realization. Her gift was a part of her, and it could touch lives in ways she had never imagined. The piano had given her a voice, a way to express herself fully, and she knew that it would continue to guide her, inspire her, and bring joy to those who listened. She drifted to sleep with a heart full of gratitude, the music still echoing in her mind, a reminder that courage, passion, and dedication could transform a simple life into something extraordinary. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a companion, a storyteller, and a bridge to a world that had once seemed beyond reach. And she knew that the music she carried within her would continue to sing, wherever life took her, touching hearts and creating moments of beauty that would last long after the notes had faded.